I'm Greg Waller. I'm a staff physician with Operation Renewed Hope. I've been working with Operation Renewed Hope for several years in many countries around the world. My family and I also lived for 7 years in a third world country. The purpose of this lecture is to just identify and make you familiar with some of the health challenges that occur in third world countries. As you can see on the slide, the title of this lecture is Personal Protection on a Foreign Field. If you're watching this video, I assume that you're going to be going with us on a mission trip to some third world country. We need to realize that third world countries are different than the United States. There's a set of unique health challenges that we need to be aware of. I would like, before this video ends, for you to realize that there are a lot of things out there that you can and possibly will catch on a foreign mission trip. Now, most of you would say, well, I'm scared to death of catching HIV or AIDS on a foreign mission trip. By the end of this lecture, I hope you'll be able to identify several things that you could catch that are even worse than HIV. I have this next slide in there because I'm from Kansas, and if you remember The Wizard of Oz, one of the famous lines from that movie is Dorothy says, "Toto, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore." And I've got the little dog on there. But I want you to realize that this line came at a point in the movie where Dorothy has just reached out to pick an apple off of an apple tree, and as she goes to pick the apple, the tree reaches out and slaps her. And she says, "Man, this is something I'm not used to." What I want you to realize is that things that we take for granted in the United States can reach out and slap you on a foreign field. When you leave the United States, things are different. You're not in Kansas anymore. This is a little quote from Isaiah, "A living dog is better than a dead lion. You have no ministry if you are sick or dead." A lot of people will say, well, I'm going to go there and I'm going to be tough and I'm going to do what the local people do. If you get sick and we have to take care of you, then you take up time from other people and you detract from the ministry. Your health is important, and if you ruin your own health on a trip, you're of no value to the rest of the team. Often those things we take for granted are the most dangerous. It's important that you realize there are many things that we take for granted in the United States that can be very dangerous in a third world country. And the first one is, what's in a handshake? How many of you in your church have handshaking time and everyone goes all over and shakes everyone's hand, and it's a really pleasant time of greeting? And I hope if you do that you use some hand cleaner as soon as you're done, because a handshake is a tremendous way to spread illness from one person to another. Viral illnesses. Virtually any viral illness can be spread by a handshake. Somebody coughs in their hand and then they come and go for a handshake with you, and right away you have whatever viral illness they have. And this certainly includes things like influenza, which is still a major killer worldwide. We just recently have had the H1N1 influenza, but influenza is out there all the time. You can get it from a handshake. Scabies. Scabies is known as the 7-year itch. It's a little mite that crawls along under your skin, and the reason it itches is because as that little mite crawls under your skin, it has to evacuate itself, and it leaves little deposits under the skin. Typically, when we go to diagnose someone with scabies, we look right between their fingers and we'll see a little trail where that little mite has crawled. The reason we look between their fingers is because the most common place to get scabies is from hand-to-hand contact, just like a handshake. Scabies in the old day was called the 7-year itch, because when you get it, you can itch for 7 years. It's treatable. You treat it with Quell or gamma-benzene. You have to put it all over your body, and it itches. You don't want to get scabies? You can get it from a handshake. Syphilis. A lot of people say, oh my goodness, I'm not going to get syphilis. I'm not going to do anything like that. I'm on a mission trip. But the second stage of syphilis, the syphilis spirochete, actually can be transmitted in the sweat during the rash portion of the second stage. If you have any skin breaks in your hands, even a hangnail, you can get syphilis as simply as from a handshake. Parasites. The most common way to get pinworms is by touching someone's hands. Little kids especially are good about going up and touching the chair that you've been sitting on, and then their fingers go to their mouth, boom, eggs. Pinworm eggs, roundworm eggs, all of that can be transmitted by a handshake. And you never know how well someone washed their hands after they went to the toilet. So it's important that you realize you can get these things in a handshake. What about typhoid, cholera, hepatitis A are all diseases that can be transmitted very easily simply by shaking hands. Diarrhea. I remember when I was a medical student, every time I would go into the inner city schools to do school physicals on school children, I'd come home with the viral diarrhea, and that's a miserable disease. Also dysentery, which is a more severe type of diarrhea. These are major causes of death worldwide. You don't necessarily die of diarrhea in the United States. We think of it as a simple problem. But when you get out of this country, where medical treatment and IV fluids are not available, it is very possible to die from simple viral diarrhea. And you can get it from a handshake. So the conclusion then, wash your hands. Every time you touch someone, every time you shake hands, every time you have contact with soil, with any surface where people may have sat or touched, you need to wash your hands. You need to wear gloves. Anytime you're treating patients, anytime you're handling any potentially infectious material, you need to have your gloves on. You need to use your hand cleaner immediately after you take off your gloves, and you still need to wash your hands. A lot of people think, well, I don't need to wash my hands because I've been using hand cleaner all day. Well, hand cleaner is alcohol, and it kills the germs that are on your hand, but it doesn't remove the soil. And if you use hand cleaner for several hours and then take a wet wipe and wipe your hands, that wet wipe will just be brown because you've gotten the germs killed, but you haven't got rid of the dirt. So you need to use hand cleaner, but you also need to wash your hands. And then just a word about gloves. You need to be sure that you protect the patient as well. When HIV first became a problem in the United States, the nurses began wearing gloves more and more, and all of a sudden there was a huge increase in the hospital-acquired infections, particularly in the intensive care units. And they began studying why did this happen, and they discovered that what was happening is the nurses, now wearing gloves, felt like they were protected, and so they went from patient room to patient room wearing the same gloves. You want to be sure when you use gloves that you protect the patient as well. Change your gloves between patients. Anytime you have touched a potentially infectious patient, anyone who has blood or body fluids or any other infection issue, you need to clean your hands with hand cleaner and change your gloves.